They have been the two best programs in the Big Ten for the past 5 or 6 years, and they get it on again at the Shoe in Columbus, with Penn State coming in at 5-2 with a couple disappointing efforts against Iowa and Illinois. We will talk up Penn State football, getting ready for the Buckeyes. We got Tim Aiden on the line, and also Marty Lee from Black Shoe Diaries. Join us on a regular basis to break down Penn State football, and you can join Tim and Marty and by extension, the rest of the crew there at Black Shoe Diaries, of course, on Black Shoe Diaries, but also our post-game show here, the Voice of College Football, after every Penn State game. So want everyone to know about that. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Not too shabby given the circumstances.
Yeah, the circumstances.
I feel not too bad.
Everybody expected Penn State to come into this game with one loss. Maybe originally thinking no losses. So the Iowa game was one thing, and now that's even further in the rearview mirror, but certainly would be a topic to discuss had not the team tripped up against Illinois. So now this Illinois performance becomes front and center and in preparation for the Buckeyes. So, hey, Tim, we'll start with you in regards to the Illinois game. I watched the whole thing, and obviously, Brett Bielema played Brett Bielema ball. I think he threw it 8 times and ran it 51, and they just, boom, slammed it ahead, and it worked, and they squeezed the clock, played better defense than they have most of the season. I think Sean Clifford's compromised. I think that's pretty obvious to see to a certain extent, and just your thoughts about was obviously a disappointing effort for a team that's a 23, 24-point favorite.
Well, if you thought that was rough, imagine how I felt having to do the post-game show afterwards. That basically turned into a live therapy session between me and Jared Salina, our managing editor.
You had to keep that in mind, Tim, when you signed up for the deal, that was possible.
Yeah, true. I didn't think it was going to include a loss like that to Illinois in that type of fashion either. Like you said, just just big dumb Brett Bielema ball. Just literally, they lined up 7 people acting as offensive linemen and just ran right at Penn State and got a good chunk of yardage out of it. Even though they only got 10 points, to the credit of the bend but don't break defense. But it was just shocking to see them run all over this Penn State. And to be fair, I mean, it's not like other teams hadn't been able to run it on Penn State. I mean, I remember Wisconsin, Ches Malusi especially picked it. I think he ran over 100 yards. Tank Bigsby is another one that comes to mind the most. Why Auburn didn't continue feeding him the ball towards the end of the game baffles me, but, that's not here or there. But it was still shocking to see just Illinois able to just run on Penn. They were having the kind of success running on Penn State that I thought maybe Penn State could have had running on them, but it was the exact opposites. And of course, I think I read some people mention this, but if Illinois hadn't thrown the ball at all, they might have actually scored a bit more in regulation. Every time I step back to pass, it usually ended in a disaster hits for them. I think they threw, at least 1-2 interceptions. I haven't looked up the stats off the top of my head. I frankly don't really care to look back at that game at all.
Yeah, what you got on this one, Marty?
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Tim said. Had Illinois just not even tried to throw the ball at all in that game, they win it in regulation. They might win it easily, which is probably the most concerning thing. It's also concerning that, Penn State jumps out to that 10-0 lead, and it looks like, all right, they're going to come out, they're going to take care of business the way you expect. You can get a lead here, get Sean Clifford out of the game, let him rest, and none of that happened. So it's just, to me, I think what's most mind-blowing is in the last 6 quarters of football, we've gone from thinking Penn State might be the best team in the Big Ten to sitting here scratching our heads thinking, does this team even get 8 wins at this point? Whenever they were leading Iowa 17-3 in the latter half of the second quarter, you're thinking, man, this team they're good. They're real good. They can beat the Buckeyes. And now you're sitting there thinking, oh, crap, we got to go play Ohio State.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts, Marty. Well, though I wouldn't, I don't know if I would say I was maybe as confident as you were about possibly beating Ohio State, but I figured at least during that, when they were up when they're up 17-3 in Iowa, that maybe they could go in there and really give them a game. And, like I said, last 6 quarters, we've gone from that to thinking like, gee, I hope maybe we can get a split between the Michigan schools, because like that would salvage something out of this, now lost season. But just more baffling to me is just, just how listless the team looked against Illinois. Like after that, you have 2 weeks. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this. You had a bye week, and this kind of it hits home on another theme. I saw like Penn State is 3-4 after a bye week under James Franklin, and especially even more concerning is after that first loss, they usually followed up right with a second loss, back-to-back losses. There's only been 2 years in the Franklin era where that hasn't happened. 2016 was one, 2019 was the other. So unfortunately it's become a disturbing pattern, and one that has to, one that's you'd like to see fixed down the road, perhaps. But unfortunately, that is kind of like a black mark on Franklin at this point.
Yeah, I mean those two things are extremely concerning. Actually, there have been 3 times they have won after suffering their first loss. Don't forget 2015, Tim, when they started the year by losing to Temple and then just barely squeaking by Buffalo the following week. But no, in all honesty, it is definitely concerning that under James Franklin, we have seen them really struggle coming out of byes. We have seen them really struggle following the first loss of the season. And another thing that could prove to be relevant is they have really struggled following Ohio State week. No matter what has happened when they've played the Buckeyes, I believe under James Franklin, they've only covered the spread once the following week. And I think overall they're like 2-5. It has not been pretty the week after Ohio State. And I think that just stems from, no one inside the Lash building in State College is ever going to tell you this, but ultimately they know Ohio State is their Super Bowl every year. Because if you want to get to where Penn State wants to be, that includes beating Ohio State, because that's going to put you in position to win the Big Ten. And I think that comes with the pros and cons. I think we see the pros of it, where Penn State typically plays Ohio State better than anybody in the Big Ten does year in, year out, because this coaching staff, this team, everybody pours their whole heart and soul into it, knowing the significance of the game. But the cons of it is we see them a lot of times the following week, look lifeless. And I just really hope that no matter what happens on Saturday night, when they go to Maryland next Saturday, they don't come out lifeless, because for a lot of reasons that, we don't need to get into tonight, but Tim and I will be able to get into in the coming weeks. Penn State is always Maryland's Super Bowl. And we saw what happened last year when Penn State comes out lifeless against Maryland the week after Ohio State.
A lot to unpack here. We got Penn State, we got Ohio State at the Horseshoe. Still a primetime game, still the nationally televised game by ABC, despite Penn State's issues last week against Illinois. And again, you could make all sorts of interpretations about what happened or what could have happened in Iowa City a few weeks earlier in a huge matchup against Iowa, where, of course, Sean Clifford left the field up 17-3, and Daquan Roberson was not up to the assignment to try to protect that lead, and it was difficult to watch. So now here we are after this Illinois game, and Penn State again hanging on to any type of hope of winning the Big Ten. With, of course, they have to win out and then hope Ohio State trips up elsewhere against Michigan or Michigan State. Before we get to the matchup against the Buckeyes, so many people on social media, of course, are making light of and taking aim at James Franklin's news conference this week, in which he mentioned the Horseshoe as the big house, confusing Ohio State and Michigan, and referring to Ohio State as Illinois a few times. So I try to take a fairly reasonable approach to this, understanding that I sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours a day. And do I ever state something, misspeak on something that where I clearly know what I'm talking about, but just happen to call Jim Harbaugh, or vice versa, or something like that. Yes, I do. Even when I clearly think, yeah, I know that individual or that situation like the back of my hand, but everyone misspeaks. He did do it like 3 times in the span of whatever, 10 or 15 minutes. So, of course, much was made of it, and there's always going to be more made of it than needs to be. But at the same time, with the coaching rumors swirling at USC and LSU, Tim, your thoughts about Franklin, where his mind could be, and of course, we get the reports that he's switched agents to Jimmy Sexton as well. So you add all that up together, and it provides a lot of fodder for Penn State critics.
Right. I guess my first thought, I did watch that press conference live, and I mean, it just seemed like he seemed like a guy who hadn't really slept much since Saturday's game. So, I mean, I can understand him misspeaking like that a few times. I'm sure his mind is just wandering in a million places right now. Now, to clarify on the agent thing, Franklin did say at the press conference that the Jimmy Sexton hire actually happened over the summer. So initially, I had read there was someone who said he hired him the week of the Iowa game, but
That's
Franklin
good to know.
was during the summer. So he's had Sexton probably since at least August, is my guess. So it's not like he made this change all of a sudden. So, and all this. So if the agent has been putting out his name for coaching rumors this whole time, it's been all Jimmy Sexton and not his previous agent, Trace Armstrong. I'll just clarify that. But I guess to address the coaching rumors, at this point, I guess I could see it going either way. There was a quote. I'm kind of catching up on this, but I guess he had a post practice media session, and there was a snippet talking about. He says, he's fiercely loyal to the Penn State staff and players, but quote, there's a lot of moving parts of all these things. Now, just that snippet alone makes you think, maybe he's got one foot out the door. But if you look at the full quote, which Greg Pickle from Penn Live shares on Twitter, you read the whole quote. It's not nearly. My thoughts changed a bit. It sounds like, and I know from just having read posts from insiders on message board, people in the know, that there are some negotiations going on, and the university is ready to make another serious financial commitment to the football program for facilities, especially. That's in dire need of upgrading, but also assistant salaries, whatever else is necessary to get Penn State to that elite tier that they've long been seeking to get to. And so we'll see how this shakes out. Now, I did see another quote about, not quote, but article about Matt Rule maybe not quite being all in on the NFL with his Carolina Panthers job, and he may be seeking to get back into college. And so if Franklin does indeed take the USC or LSU job, right now, gun to my head, I think Matt Rule would be the next head coach at Penn State. He's a former Nittany Lion player, and he's also from State College, or he just went to State College High School, fellow State High alum. His dad actually was a gym teacher there for many years, was my gym teacher, great guy, Denny Rule. And I think his dad grew up in State College as well. So, the family loves that area. That's a name. If again, I'm not saying Franklin's gone. I think it's going either way. But if Franklin does leave, then if I were a betting man, I think I would throw some money down on it being Matt Rule.
Yeah, Tim, to build off your comment on his quote after practice tonight about being fiercely loyal to Penn State, like I said, if you read the full comment, he goes and talk about how he feels his actions the last 8 years have proven his commitment to the university, to the community. And, I was able to watch a replay of part of his post-game practice availability before we hopped on here. And it very much came off as a guy who doesn't want to leave Penn State, but wants to make sure he has that commitment that he needs from the university from a financial standpoint for a variety of things, like you said, facilities, assistant coaches, all of that. So to me, it really read as a guy trying to put public pressure on the university to get this deal done and get done what he needs. If he were happen to go, I do agree that I think Matt Rule would be the first call. If Rule would not take the job, I think Luke Fickell would be next. And I have a hard time seeing Luke Fickell say no. And if he would, it's probably Matt Campbell. So either way, Penn State's going to have plenty of options for good coaches if something were to happen with James Franklin. But, at this point, I really do. If I had to guess right now, I would guess that James Franklin is still here next fall. And I would assume that it would most likely be under a restructured contract where maybe he necessarily doesn't get the biggest raise in the world, but the university is committing a lot more money to his assistant coaches pool, to facility upgrades, things of that nature, where, I feel like people who don't follow Penn State closely probably don't realize how much Penn State truly lags in the arms race of college football, which when you consider that they're one of the true blue bloods of all of college football, one of the most historic, most successful programs of all time, and the success they've had in the last, 6-7 years under Franklin, you would expect them to have the best of the best, and they really don't. And a lot of it has come from struggling to get full buy-in from the athletic department, the administration, the BOT, things of that nature. But I do think that Franklin will be here. And I think if he's here, he gets what he wants from those people. So I do expect to see Penn State really put a big financial commitment into the football program this offseason.
I would agree with you there, Marty. And from everything I've been reading, I'm sure you read. I think you also have, you have an insider subscription to Lions 24/7, so you probably see the same posts that I do about people in the know who are saying that the university is ready to make another serious financial commitment to football, and more than they've ever made before. I guess to say, I know maybe it was kind of just you misspeaking, but I do think the athletic department, I think Sandy Barber has, maybe I'm not the biggest fan of her, maybe from a fundraising standpoint, but I will say I think she's done a great job of anytime Franklin's requested for more money for whatever it is, for assistant, whatever, she's been willing to try to move heaven and earth to make it happen for him, because she realized that's a great thing she's got in James Franklin. And I'm sure that they're working behind the scenes to make something, whatever he's asking for. They're probably working. It's not just her, but it's also, the president, Eric Barron, and also, of course, the board of trustees to an extent. They all got to be on board with that. It sounds like they are, from what I've gathered. We'll see for sure. But I think what's also given me some optimism in general, I guess this is, Franklin's status as coach notwithstanding, I think whether it's Franklin or whoever else in 2022, I think they're ready. They're going to make a serious. The reason I think they're going to make a serious commitment is I saw what they did with the basketball hire with Micah Shrewsbury. That's a guy that they had to show out give him a couple million to bring him on board, but also he demanded a big assistant salary pool and, most importantly, a big recruiting budget. So now they've actually got a separate recruiting department for basketball, similar to how football has like a recruiting department with a bunch of guys. The basketball program's starting to do that too now, and it's already paying dividends for the hoops program already. So that's something that was kind of eye-opening to me as a lifelong Penn State hoops fan. I mean, they've been notoriously cheap, the athletic, as long as I've been alive with the hoops program. So that was eye-opening to me. And I think they're going to make a commitment like that to the second biggest moneymaker in the athletic department. Then I see no reason why they won't do the same for their big cash cow.
Got Marty Leap on the line, and also Tim Aiden join us on a regular basis here to break down Penn State football. You can join their work at Black Shoe Diaries on SB Nation, and of course their post-game show that we have here at the Voice of College Football. We are right now simulcasting. We're on the main channel and also over on the Penn State channel. So Penn State fans, please subscribe to our Penn State channel. And also, if you're just a supporter of what we do here at the Voice of College Football, subscribe to the Penn State channel. And here's the deal. Subscribe to the Penn State channel and get us to 1,000 subs. Once you get us to 1,000 subs, if you want to unsubscribe, that's fine. Get us safely over 1,000 subs, and then you can unsubscribe if you are just helping us build these channels. That's a key metric in terms of YouTube traffic and so forth. How good as a coach is James Franklin? So he seems to be the front runner, at least in the minds of the media and fans, for the LSU and the USC jobs. And we're talking two of the top 5 to 10 jobs in the country. So he's well thought of within the industry, but there seems to be certain criticisms about him, Marty, as a game coach, as a game manager. That would be the major knock on him, I would think, his strategy in the moment.
Yeah, and I will say one area that James Franklin really has improved in recent years has been his clock management, both before halftime and late in the game. That is something that early on at Penn State was a major struggle and definitely cost the Nittany Lions some games. 2015 against Northwestern, one game comes to mind for me. They had at the time, I think, like top 15 Northwestern team on the road, dead to rights, and just terrible clock management at the end of the game cost them that one. But at this point with me, in terms of the pure X's and O's and coaching ability of James Franklin, what really worries me most is what Tim and I touched on earlier, is his seemingly just struggles or inability to get his team up after a bye week and to get his team to bounce back from a loss. This is his 8th year at Penn State, and I could be wrong, but I believe this is the 6th time they've lost back-to-back games in a season. Like, that can't happen. And it can't happen if you want to get to where they want to be and where this program honestly can be. I'm not saying Penn State's Alabama or Georgia or whatever it is. They're not. For a lot of reasons, they never will be. But this is a team that, how close they've been to the playoff the last 5 or 6 years, there's no reason for them to not have at least one playoff bid at this point. And to me, with James Franklin, because I think a lot of his in-game decisions in that he kind of gets drugged for aren't totally on him. He does not make a lot of calls. Obviously, it has nothing to do with the defense. And the offense, there have been times when his offense coordinator struggled during the John Donovan years, and at times last year with Kirk Schrocker, where he stepped in and called plays. But when he's had Joe Moorhead, this year with Mike Yurcich, those guys run the offense. So with James, what's important to him is that clock management area, which, like I said, he's gotten much better at. But just having his team ready to go is something that he does seem to struggle with. But it's weird because when Penn State plays these big games, they're ready to go. They're always ready for Ohio State. They have, I don't think they've ever struggled at all. They haven't won every bowl game under James Franklin, but they've never come out flat. They've always been competitive, and you look at some other big regular season games like Iowa this year, they were dragging Iowa's defense up and down the field before Clifford got hurt. A couple of whiteouts against Michigan where they just blasted the Wolverines. It's what's weird is when you're in that letdown opportunity, his teams have struggled to avoid the letdown. And to me, that's the one area that, as a fan of a team James Franklin coaches, I worry about most. And the one area that I think James Franklin as a coach still has the most room for growth and improvement.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to, agree in general. I think he's definitely improved on the clock management part. We've all noticed that. Although one thing that still seems to be a problem is being able to close out, have a good enough run get where you can just pick up a couple first downs on the ground late in the game and run the clock out. Or, I think there's only one. I think 2019 is the only year I can think of where they were actually able to do that. Like, I think of the game at Iowa where, it was a close game throughout. Then Penn State took control mid fourth quarter, went up by 2 scores. Then Iowa got a quick touchdown strike, and suddenly it's a 1-score game again with a few minutes left, and Penn State needs to pick up a couple first downs to ice it, which they ended up doing, feeding Noah Kane, who back then was a freshman who showed plenty of promise for the future and whatnot. And boy, those were the days. But that's one thing. Just also, like I said, just having the team ready after a bye week, or more importantly, having a team, fired up, ready to go, kick some people in the teeth after a loss. Like, I just don't, you would think they would come out kind of pissed off, ready to take it out on a lowly Illinois team, and even especially if we have 2 weeks to get ready and to heal up. And I mean, they looked like they didn't want to be there. I mean, it baffles me for a team that's as close knit, that seems, they seem to be, seem to be all in on Franklin and the staff. I mean, how they come out so listless in games like the Illinois game, are just, I mean, I'm kind of at a loss for words.
Yes, especially that Illinois game where when you jump up 10-0 on that Illinois team at home at Beaver Stadium, you expect that Illinois team to lay down and die and quit. And it was almost the complete opposite way around, which is what makes it so frustrating for me. I mean, yeah, there was that bad call where the running back, the referee said his forward progress was stopped. It was not. That should have been a fumble that was recovered for a touchdown by Penn State. I feel very confident if that thing does get to 17-0, they just roll them. But to see them be the team who, like you said, Tim, did not look interested in anything like that was concerning.
Yeah, not just from an emotional and mental standpoint, should they be in a better position having a lot to play for, while Illinois, in terms of tangibles, doesn't have anything to play for, but also just schematically in terms of the way Illinois plays football, that's such an advantage to be up by 2 scores against them versus other teams, because as we saw with 38 yards passing, that's Illinois. So even from a strategic standpoint, you're in a better position than you are typically in a 2-score game, leading there. In addition to the, again, psychology of it. You can get my picks, folks, at Patreon. Just join our Voice of College Football community there. 10-6 against the spread last week. 95-58 for the season. Plus, we've got a lot of other stuff available for you there on Patreon. And also, Christmas time's coming. So everybody's jumping online, going to Amazon. So when you do that, please grab the link in the description section of the videos that we provide. So grab that link, put it somewhere where you will be able to find it, and doesn't cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. So you might as well use our link there to Amazon. A couple people brought up the name Joe Moorhead, as you did, Marty, as well. How much did that loss hurt? Have they ever recovered fully from losing him?
You're muted, Marty.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. To me, it's not so much not recovering from the loss of Joe Moorhead as much as it was the Ricky Ronnie hire just didn't work out. And at the time, I personally did not mind the Ricky Ronnie hire. I totally understood it. They were grooming him to replace Moorhead. And, you can't, to me, I also don't like to say he has, I saw someone in the comments say he has one without Moorhead. That just isn't true. In 2018, they went 9-3, and that was a year where Trace McSorley played half the season on one leg and with a bum shoulder. If Trace isn't banged, and Tommy Stevens was hurt too, so their backup was a redshirt freshman, Sean Clifford. So, if the quarterbacks are healthy, they probably win another game. They come out in 2019 without Joe Moorhead, go 11-2 and win the Cotton Bowl. So, I don't think it's a lack of Joe Moorhead. And honestly, I'm not saying he is or isn't, but I think there's an argument to be made that Mike Yurcich is a better offense coordinator than Joe Moorhead anyway. But yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that James Franklin can't win without Joe Moorhead.
Yeah, I don't think. Someone had a comment like James Franklin has done nothing since Joe Moorhead left. I think Mark had it flashing the screen earlier, but I'd be inclined to disagree with that. I mean, Penn State did get to a New Year's Six Bowl with Ricky Ronnie calling the shots as OC in 2019. So as much as, we and other part of the fan base did criticize Ronnie for some of his play calling, maybe didn't quite have feel for the flow of the game, or he would, they'd be doing something that would work, but then he did, just for the sake of mixing it up or getting cute, he would suddenly run something else instead of running whatever play kept working. So that was a little frustrating. But I do think. I mean, I will say I think with Yurcich, it really seemed like he had finally found that stellar coordinator again, and it was looking pretty good, until that after that first quarter against Iowa. So it's like when Marty said. I think Franklin Sticks. They bring this recruiting class, which includes Drew Aller, currently the number 1 rated quarterback in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. I would definitely, I'd definitely be curious to see it. If that's a guy who Yurcich or maybe if it's someone else. I don't know. Yurcich could, if he follows a Moorhead trajectory, maybe after 2 years he gets a head coaching off. But whoever, whether it's Yurcich or someone else they bring in, which I'm sure could be someone you pay top dollar for, like Yurcich, whoever the hot OC is after him. Maybe they could, they could really work with a stud like Aller, and that's the thing. That's I feel like an elite quarterback, if Aller lives up to the hype. I mean, I'll say that I think an elite quarterback can mask a lot of your deficiencies, whether it's coaching or other personnel on the field. I mean, I like to think of the example of Clemson. They had Deshaun Watson. I think that's essentially what finally got them over the hump, what got them into the playoff, what ultimately got them their first national championship in the modern era. And then, of course, they followed it up a couple years later with Trevor Lawrence winning them a Natty his true freshman year. And, they got back to the playoffs a few more times under him. So I really do think, having an elite quarterback could really be what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, that's a comparison I've made a few times, that Drew Aller could be to Penn State what Deshaun Watson was to Clemson. I mean, for the longest time, Clemsoning was a thing. It's what Clemson was known for. And to an extent, I feel like Penn State's kind of known for their version of Penn Stating. Yeah, and it's just amazing how much that elite quarterback can hide some of those warts on your roster. And all it takes is getting one of those guys to develop and pan out and be successful and be a high pick in the NFL draft for you to keep them coming and recruiting. So, I mean, I'm not at all going to sit here and say Drew Aller turns into Deshaun Watson. Every Penn State fan in the world would take that in a heartbeat, obviously. But I do think Aller has the potential to have the same kind of impact on the Penn State program as a whole as Deshaun Watson did on Clemson, because Aller he has all the tools to be an absolutely elite quarterback at the collegiate level. I mean, there's a reason he's ranked as number 1 quarterback in the country. So I do think that he is, without a doubt, the most important recruit that James Franklin has gotten. Assuming he does sign his letter of intent here in a few weeks, he is the most important recruit that James Franklin has gotten to campus during his time in Happy Valley.
Talking with our pair from the Black Shoe Diaries here, Marty Leap, Tim Aiden, do an exceptional job over there. So check out their work. Get set with all the information, the insight over there, perspective as Penn State prepares for Ohio State in Columbus. Of course, this again, the series that's been the most hotly contested by far. Of course, Ohio State's owned the conference for a decade plus, actually, like 15 years. But Penn State has been, I don't think there's any question, as Marty said near the top of the show, the closest in terms of the recruiting rankings. And then that has translated on the field to providing the best action year after year, winning in 2016, razor tight games in 17 and 18. In 19, when Ohio State blasted everyone by 4 or 5 touchdowns. Of course, it was a 21-17 game in the fourth quarter. So that has been the game, of course, in the Big Ten. So as we look at this matchup, it looks bleak from a Penn State perspective. It looks bleak, but I think we are, and this is a cliched comment, but prisoners to the most recent, to the present. And the present is losing as 23-point underdog at home to Illinois versus Ohio State getting better and better and better. And yes, Ohio State's playing better football, and this may turn into another season, which, despite we've all been pointing toward Halloween weekend as, okay, this is when it all comes down in the Big Ten. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, and even on the other side, Iowa, Wisconsin, that we're going to start to figure things out and get these titanic matchups. There's just going to be this bloodbath in the Big Ten Eastern Division. Well, there's a possibility that Ohio State's just better than everyone else, and they're going to win these games by 15 or 20 points, and the other three are going to beat up on each other. That's a possibility. Or we could just get these titanic struggles. That said, I don't want to be a prisoner to, again, the recent past, because for the first several games of the season, I was looking at Penn State and thinking, that's the best defense in the Big Ten right there. And Clifford's developing into, it's difficult to judge CJ Stroud. He's just got so many advantages to what he's doing on offense that Clifford might arguably be the best quarterback in the conference. That I was just thinking, this Penn State team is serious. Now, are they a considerably different team today than they were 3 weeks ago? PJ Mustafer's out. Clifford's compromised. Tim, what do you think about this? Because I also heard that in the Illinois game, in addition to Mustafer, there were a couple other interior linemen. They didn't name them during the broadcast, but also missing. And I know that, the defense, for as good as it is, has just been, beyond Mustafer, been beat up a little bit.
Well, maybe you're referring to Hakeem Beamon, who hasn't played a down this year for Penn State. It was announced earlier. It was announced, I believe, like the week of the Auburn game that, Beamon, while he's practicing on the team, he wouldn't be playing at all this season. And it sounds. I'm not gonna. I don't want to speculate on here. I've read possible reasons for people in the know, but so Beeman's been gone, and then preseason Odessa Isaac suffered a knee injury, which put him out for the year. So between Beeman, Isaac, Mustafer, those are three out of four people. I don't know, Bicchetti being the four that were projected starters for this D line. So, you're only down. You only got one starter left, who was part of your original starting lineup on that D line. So they've really had to dig into the bench, and there's not quite as much depth there as you'd like to have. They've been guys like Devon Ellies, Keziah Izzard, they've done a good job, admirable job stepping up. But I'll say losing PJ was definitely a huge blow to the defense, and I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think he makes Illinois run for 300 less yards all on his own, but I'm sure it wouldn't have hurt to have had him in there last week to try to help swallow up the run game when they were running right at them. And then of course with Cliff, obviously, it's a testament to just how little faith they had in Taquan Roberson or Christian Veilleux to try to play it in place of him, because frankly Cliff should have been sitting. And you know what? If Will Levis were not in Kentucky right now and we're still at Penn State, that's a game where Levis gets to start while Cliff rests. And it's a game they would probably, I would think, would be able to eke out a win in, with just Levis smashing through that Illinois defense, just like how Bielema was trying to smash through Penn State's with his running backs. So, but if Cliff has been saying, Cliff said he's close to he's 100%. James Franklin said he's close to 100% in the press conference. So, we'll see. I have my doubts, but if he is indeed closer to 100%, then I would hope he'll be given more. He'll be given the green light to take off and run when there's pressure instead of being forced to stay in the pocket. It was clear the staff wasn't trying to get him to run at all, for fear of him getting hurt even more before the Ohio State game. But, this is a game where Penn State's really just playing with house money. They're an 18.5-point underdog. Just about everyone thinks they're going to get massacred Saturday night. I feel like if he's truly 100%, you let him just try to be the Cliff that we had for the first 5.5 games this season. If he can be like that, I do think Ohio State's secondary is still ripe enough for the picking with a potent enough passing attack. And if Cliff is healthy enough, I feel like he would be able to do some damage there. Now, Ohio State has so much firepower offensively. Trevion Henderson, who's probably going to pick up 200 yards, if I were a betting man, against this defense. And of course, like C.J. Stroud, he's got Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson to chuck the ball to. I'm sure they'll hook up a handful of times when necessary. So, they'll put up enough points to keep Penn State at bay. But I would like to see Penn State, if that offense could come out firing and, at least, make it entertaining, at least, kind of have the crowd a little silent, maybe get up early on them, or at least, or, just, I don't know, just surprise us really. I mean, at this point, I've already got a plan in place to just, I'm going to watch on the TV, but once it gets out of hand, I'm just firing up on the iPad while I play video games or something, and have to pay attention to it.
So you're not one of those that watch until the last second goes off the clock, regardless of the score.
It really depends. I mean, obviously, if it's Penn State, it's on the winning end of a blowout, I'll watch it. But if they're on the losing end of it, I mean, it's kind of, maybe I'm like flipping around to other games or something and just sort of going back and forth.
See, Tim has it lucky where, since I'm the one who's in charge of the Black Sheep Diaries Twitter account on game days, I have to sit there and suffer it out to the bitter end. So I don't get any relief in these nights where things are just not going well whatsoever.
Well, I did have to do the
Nice.
post game for Illinois, so there was that.
Is this true? At least I dodged that because I had a 6th grade football game to be at. So I'd never been so happy looking back on it to have a game time or start time for a game moved up 4 hours.
Nice. So Marty, what's the formula for an upset?
I think if it's going to happen, to me, the biggest thing is you got to keep your offense on the field. Like Tim said, Ohio State's offense has incredible firepower. Now, I do think Penn State's defense, even without PJ Mustipher, is good enough to maybe not stop them, but contain them. You mentioned their receivers, maybe the best in the country. Penn State secondary, one of the best in the country, probably the best in the Big Ten. They can match up with these guys. Now, they're going to struggle to stop Trevion Henderson in the running game, but if you can keep your offense on the field and A, cut down on the amount of opportunities Ohio State has to score, and B, let your defense rest, that'll work in your favor. Offensively, like you said, Tim, if Clifford's healthy, if he truly is healthy, you've got to let him play his game. Let him run around. Let him use his legs to extend plays. Let his receivers get downfield. In one area of Ohio State's defense, I think is a big question mark, is their linebacker play and their ability to stop the intermediate passing. Drag routes to Jahan Dotson, to Parker Washington, getting Keandre Lambert-Smith out in space. If your tight ends can remember how to catch the ball after the last few weeks, using them to beat Ohio State's linebackers. If Sean Clifford is 100% healthy, there is definitely a path to Penn State winning this game. I'm just not convinced he is, no matter what the coaching staff says. And also, you combine that with Penn State's inability to run the ball all season, because this is an Ohio State rush defense that has been suspect at times. But until you see Penn State run the ball, you can't have confidence they're going to do it. But I think if the Nittany Lions can at least establish a somewhat average rushing attack and can let Clifford run around, use his legs, play his game, and exploit the middle of that field with your passing attack, keep your offense on the field, let your defense rest, I think they've got a shot. One thing I did read from the media session at Penn State's practice tonight was defensive coordinator Brent Pry just hammering time and time again with the secondary that when the opportunity is there to force a turnover, we got to do it. You've got to do it. And I agree with that. I think if Penn State can force a couple turnovers on Saturday, that could go a long way too, because this is a secondary with guys like Jaquan Brisker and Joey Porter Jr., both of which are probably going to be first-round picks one day. Jair Brown and Tyree Castro-Fields, Daquan Hardy, all guys who are going to play in the NFL. The opportunity is there to force some turnovers. And, C.J. Stroud has played better in recent weeks, but he's still a quarterback that we have not seen find success against a good defense yet. So I think if the Nittany Lions can come out on defense, force a couple turnovers, and then, like I said, on offense, keep the ball. Don't be afraid to work that play clock. Let your defense rest. Keep Ohio State's offense off the field. If Clifford is truly 100%, there is a pathway. There is a scenario where Penn State wins this game. I'm just not confident. He didn't even look 50% last Saturday. I just can't see how he improves that much in a week, especially when he took some pretty nasty shots last week too. So I just don't see how he improves that much health-wise in 1 week.
Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football, and can't necessarily stack my new site here, voiceofcollegefootball.com, up against Black Shoe Diaries by any stretch, but we did pick up our first writer the other day. So we got our first article posted. So if anyone wants to write for us, if you want to write for Penn State, you certainly contact Tim and Marty, and they may have a spot for you. But if you just want to write about college football, anything of your interest within college football, of course, hit me up at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Just go to the top of the page. It says write for us, and fill that out, and you'll be in contact with me, and we'll take it from there. And we left this behind in the James Franklin discussion about his coaching strengths and weaknesses. I just can't imagine that after the second overtime, you have to start going for two in the third overtime. So from the third through the ninth overtimes, that's 7 overtimes, correct? They scored 1 2-point conversion, right? Out of 7.
Yeah.
That you can't.
Yeah.
Because they scored 18. They had 16 going to overtime. 7 tries, 1 conversion from the 2.5-yard line that you can't dial up a play that's going to, if you don't have the brute force to get it done, to just drive it ahead, which of course the offensive line's not been up to standard, that you can't dial up a play to make it happen. And to his defense, the one play that they did dial up, they just didn't connect on the pass to Clifford out of the backfield, and that looked like a sure score.
Yeah, that's what's super frustrating as a Penn State fan, is not being able to get 3 yards against anybody, but especially Illinois. And then, like you said, Mark, just that reverse pass with Tyler Warren was perfectly designed. That Illinois' entire defense flowing to the other side of the field. That should have been an easy score. And I think one thing that should be noted there, because I could see somebody, well, he's got normally doesn't throw the ball, Tyler Warren. He was a high school quarterback, and he's only a redshirt freshman this year. He's not that far removed from playing quarterback week in and week out. And now, granted, that's a big difference between playing quarterback in high school and playing in the Big Ten, but he's a guy who I'm sure he'd be the first person to tell you he should make that throw 10 times out of 10. There was a shovel pass to Brenton Strange that when Strange caught it, looked like he was going to walk into the end zone. He just totally missed where the hole was at and got walloped. There was so many mistakes by Penn State in that game, not using Dotson at all. I don't think Dotson was targeted. After the first overtime, they tried to run a fade route to Dotson. After that, I don't think he was targeted again on the 2-point conversion tries. So just a lot of frustration as a Penn State fan coming out of that one. But yeah, it's you don't want to keep dwelling on a game, but I said it after the game, and Tim, I know you agree with me. That was honestly one of the worst losses in program history. To me, that's the worst loss since they lost to Toledo at Beaver Stadium in 2000. So it's tough not to be stuck dwelling on a game like that.
Well, at least that Toledo team, I believe, won like 9-10 games at least. So
yeah, I'll give you that. That Toledo team was good, and that Penn State team turned out to be pretty stinky. But because I saw a lot of people mention the 6-4 Iowa game, and that's one thing I said was, yeah, that game was an abomination to football. But Penn State that year won, I think, like 3-9, and only scored more than 20 points like once. So again, that was a very, very bad Penn State offense. You didn't expect that from this team. You didn't expect that from a team that going into halftime against Iowa, you're still looking at them as a team that could very easily win the Big Ten. So just all of that.
But I'll say, having attended 6-4 as I was a student, I mean, that was the most painful game I ever witnessed. I mean, that Illinois loss is right out there. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. 6-4 is. I mean, when when the opposing team takes a safety because they know your offense is so terrible and your special team is so terrible, they won't be able to score again. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. At least Penn State did find the end zone once in regulation and another time in the overtime period against Illinois. And I'll also say, I think I would say 99 Minnesota might have been even more gut wrenching in a way. I mean, here, like Penn State, I mean, at least I don't want to make, look, I mean, I'm not making excuses because really there was no excuse to lose that, but Cliff was hobbled clearly. And that, as Cliff goes, so does the offense. So, that's, that and not having a run game at all. I mean, if they had any semblance, I said this on the post-game show, if Penn State had any semblance of running game, they could have won that despite a hobble Cliff. Or they could have rolled out, Taquan Roberson or Christian Veilleux and probably could have, just like what Illinois did, they could have just, pounded the rock a bunch of times and, probably win by like 10 to 14 points. But I don't know, that 99 Minnesota game, I think that's probably, in terms of like what's the most gut-wrenching loss, that's probably, I'd say, the most for me. I was at that game too, unfortunately, and when Dan Nystrom booted that upset clinching field goal for the uprights, and killed Penn State's BCS title hopes, that was, I don't think it was any more heartbreaking than that. And the team just, from there, they just, they ended up losing to Michigan and Michigan State the following week, finished 9-3. When, they did take it out on Texas A&M in the Alamo Bowl, but, for a team that seemed to have national championship aspirations, I mean, that just took all the air out of that balloon.
Not 17 and 18 against Ohio State.
Well, those are pretty heartbreaking too.
Especially 17, because that would have sent you to the Big Ten championship game. You would have been a big favorite in playoff. 18, you went 9-3, so that wouldn't have necessarily.
Right. Now that was in September. I mean, that was like the first, I think it was their Big Ten opener, I believe.
Yeah, true.
The second game.
They'd beaten Illinois the week before on a Friday night.
Game. But if they had won that, if they had held on and won that, now I still think Michigan probably would have still destroyed them. I think that Michigan team was on a tear until Ohio State exposed them in the game. But I'll say, if they did beat Ohio State, and assuming they beat Michigan, actually that would have been, I think Michigan might have gone on to win the Big Ten perhaps, because even if Ohio State still beat them, I mean, they still would have been the East champion by virtue of tiebreaker that year.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're not alone in teams that Ohio State's torturing in the Big Ten Eastern Division, because certainly Michigan is at the top rung.
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
So I guess I have two questions to close things out, and we appreciate everybody being here online, and certainly appreciate Tim and Marty making this happen, because I just thought, this is a game that we wanted to certainly highlight, and from the Penn State side, because there was a comment in the live chat about the running game being dismal. We went into the 2020 season, and all three of us had multiple conversations about how good this running back room was. Unfortunately, Journey Brown's career was derailed coming off that remarkable Cotton Bowl game. Noah Cain, Devin Ford were top 5 recruits coming out of high school. Devin Ford was lost early in that season. Kevon Lee has turned into a capable back. So is the running back room just been decimated by all those factors? Is it still nearly a top-notch room? Is it not showing what it can do because of the offensive line, which of course is the best friend of a running game?
I personally think it's a combination of factors. To one, Noah Cain all season has not looked totally healthy and looks like a back who's lacking confidence, which after the last 2 seasons, you can see where that would come from. He said both seasons ended with injury. Well, I guess 2019, technically, he wasn't ended because he did play in the Cotton Bowl and had a good game, but missed the last 5 or 6 games during the season. And Kevon Lee's been banged up. They brought in John Lovett as a transfer from Baylor, who when Lovett has played has looked really good. Probably has been their best running back, but he's been hurt a whole bunch. And then you take those injuries and you throw in the struggles of the offensive line. There have been games this year where the backs have looked healthy and there hasn't been blocking. And then honestly, there have been times the offensive line's done okay, and there have been lanes to run and the running backs haven't seen them. And well, yes, you got to pin that on the running backs. You got to have better vision. Whenever you get used to getting stuffed, you have yard in the backfield every carry, it's going to make it more difficult to keep your eyes downfield and try and find those running lanes when they are there. So I think the struggles of the running game really has been a combination of factors between running backs who have been banged up, the offensive line struggling, running backs not seeing running lanes, just a calamity of affairs for the Penn State rushing attack.
Anything else on that, Tim?
I mean, Marty hit on it. Just it's a combination of like Kane not living up to the hype, and to be fair, he's clearly banged up. He used to be a guy who could break a couple tackles. His freshman year, like break a couple tackles and still fall forward, pick up some yardage. But now it's like he goes down on first contact. He doesn't have that shiftiness he used to have. He's never been a speedster. I mean, that's not his thing. But he had that smooth running and ability to fall forward and still not go down on first contact. And that's something Kevon Lee is still decent at, I think. But that's the thing too. Kevon really seemed to emerge in the second half of last season as what Noah Kane was expected to be, and then I read this offseason that he got his 40 time down by a full tenth of a second. You're thinking like, okay, well, power and some speed now. Like this, it could be a lethal combination, but unfortunately, he's just been rather pedestrian himself. And John Lovett. I don't think it's helped by, again, lack of blocking, but you just feel like you're kind of waiting for him to just break one to the house. He's got the wheels. You just feel like if he gets an opening, he hasn't had that opening yet. If he gets an opening, he's going to break one. I guess I'm still holding out hope he's going to break one. Maybe it'll happen against like Rutgers, down the stretch. I don't know. Kind of like when Lamont Wade returned a kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown against Illinois, in that week before Christmas game. So
it took him to literally the final game of his career to finally make a play.
Yeah, so maybe
top 100 recruit,
love it to take one to the house. So, and then Keziah Holmes, I was hoping maybe he could find a way to carve out some time for himself. Maybe not just in the run, but on special teams. And unfortunately, it's nowhere to be seen. Devin Ford's obviously been the special teams guy and done some things, but yeah, it's been very disappointing. I'd say, frankly, even more disappointing than the offensive line, because by now we know better than to have to put any real faith in the offensive line being good. It's just don't be terrible at this point. This is the expectation. Now we'll see. Maybe next year, this class holds. Assuming Franklin stays. You do have Nick Singleton coming in, number one running back in the country, so maybe that'll help. I don't know. That's a discussion for another day.
And Tim, I'll latch on to that comment about if Franklin stays to finish us off with this. And I admittedly am asking the type question that I hate people asking me, but I do what I do and I'm here. So of course I'm going to be asked this question. So I can't be mad about it. But when people ask questions like, who's going to win the Heisman Trophy? And my response is, you want me to predict what other people are going to vote? Or if they ask me, is so-and-so going to leave such and such school? And I say, I don't know what that individual's priorities are in terms of how much money they want to make, what kind of program they want to go, so it's all speculation. But I will ask, is James Franklin staying at Penn State?
Well,
knowing fully that you don't know, you really don't know, you guys are just taking a stab at it.
I mean, yeah, my answer is going to be, I really don't know. I guess earlier this week, I had a feeling he was likely gone, but I don't know, reading his comment and reading the full context of his comment about how he's, been fiercely loyal to Penn State for the last years and how the moving parts and all, but I read that full quote and the context of it, I get the idea, and I think Marty hit on it earlier in the show. He wants to be a Penn. It's just a matter of he wants to, but he's also got to make sure that the university is giving him, everything he feels is necessary, to get Penn State over the hump, to go from good to elite, as he infamously said a few years ago. So I think it's going to depend on how those negotiations are going. It really sounds like he's trying to work something out. Now, I mean, I know that Jimmy Sexton news, obviously, that was initially part of why I was thinking he might be gone. But when he clarified his press conference yesterday that, he had hired him this summer, I kind of changed my thinking a bit. So, I mean, I guess if I had to put a percent, I'm saying, I guess I would put it maybe right now. I guess this is a concern. I'm going to say maybe 60-40. Franklin's a coach in 2022.
This might be a better question. Do you guys care? How much do you care if he stays? Will you guys be like, shoot, like he's our guy. I didn't want him to go. He's a really good coach. Or like, he's a decent coach, but we can do just as well. We're good. And it seemed like from your earlier statement, Marty, that you feel like there's enough really good coaching candidates out there that Penn State's going to be right in the running for one of those guys. And you're good with that.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is, I've said this a bunch to people. I don't necessarily think Penn State can do better than James Franklin, but I think you can say that about a lot of programs in the country because I think James Franklin is a good coach. But you also have to wonder, have they peaked? Have they reached that ceiling under James Franklin? And you throw in your guys like Rule, Fickle, Campbell, who have all proven to be very good coaches at lesser programs with much less, just at their arsenal than they would have at Penn State. And you've got to feel confident Penn State will land a good coach. Now, that said, if James Franklin is going to leave, the biggest reason I would not want it to be this offseason is another guy we talked about in Drew Allar. Like we said, that elite quarterback can cover up a lot of things on your team. I personally, from what I've gathered, it seems Allar is more committed to Mike Yurcich per se than maybe James Franklin. So let's say maybe James goes, they bring in like a guy like Luke Fickell, who's defensive first, and maybe he keeps Yurcich as offense coordinator. Allar most likely sticks around, but that's not a risk I want to take. I have no doubts that if James Franklin leaves, Penn State would get a good coach. Would that coach be better than James Franklin? Probably not. But again, I don't think there's very many coaches you can say that about. But
Urban Meyer ain't walking through that door.
Yeah, exactly. Saban ain't leaving
Yeah.
Alabama. But yeah, my biggest thing is I just would hate to lose Drew Allar. And that's my big thing with not wanting James Franklin to leave right this very second. And again, like I said, I think he's a good coach, and I'm more than willing to take my chances of Franklin being here with Allar as quarterback and see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm with Marty. I mean, I want Franklin to stick around, if anything, just for this incoming class. Not just Drew Allar, but also I mentioned briefly some of running backs. Nick Singleton, number one running back in the country according to 24/7 Sports. Denied Dennis Sutton, elite edge rusher, blue chip recruits out of McDonough High School in Baltimore. Home, PJ Mustafer, Curtis Jacobs, current Nittany Lions that were tearing. Devon Ellies, yes, who's stepped in nicely, with PJ's absence. So I would want I want to stick around. I want to see. I feel like if he sticks around, I think the next 2 or 3 years are going to be the moment of truth. He'll have that elite quarterback in now, got some other nice pieces coming in, and hopefully 23 class could be similarly good. We'll see. It's early, but I think if he sticks around, I think these next 2 or 3 years, we're going to find out for sure whether or not Penn State can get over the hump with James Franklin. And so, by the way, either they will or they won't, and then Franklin will probably move on to something else. So will Penn State. So that's how I see it right now. Now that being said, okay, let's say he does go on. You know, like Marty said, I don't think there's anyone out there who's clearly an upgrade over Franklin, but I do think there's a couple of guys that could be, you know, similarly as good. I think Matt Rule's one of them. I think Luke Fickell's another, possibly Matt Campbell. And, you know, again, I think my money, like I said, my money would be on Rule being the next guy if Franklin does leave. But being said, I do think between Rule, Fickell, Campbell, I think one of those three would end up being the next guy at Penn State. And they could, at the very least, they could have similar success to Franklin, you know, getting to, you know, New Year's Six bowls more often than not. Don't know how recruiting would go, but maybe player development could see a bit of an improvement. Maybe O-line could be a little better. Who knows? I guess what I'm saying, I won't be necessarily apocalyptic if Franklin leaves, but I hate to see this 22 class he's bringing in, you know, just come apart.
Guys, it's been great. Thanks so much for being here. Tim Aiden, Black Shoe Diaries, Marty Leap, Black Shoe Diaries. So catch them over there, SB Nation, and all the work that they do. And they do the post game here at the Voice of College Football for Penn State. Track that on the Big Ten channel, Voice of College Football, and the Penn State channel as well this weekend against Ohio State. Guys, it's been awesome. Thanks so much for doing this.
Hey,
Absolutely. Anytime.